Chris Kelsey here with
Matt Howell.
On this episode of The First Run, Matt and I are going to discuss Possessor and the emotional toll the film took on my soul. Then our non-marathon of horror anthology films continues with Scare Me, or does it? We'll also review the big releases on physical media featuring your straight-to-DVD and streaming picks of the week. Then, of course, we'll wrap up the big show with Matt and I sharing our 5 favorite possession movies, with, of course, with me adding a bunch of ridiculous caveats, as always. So,
wouldn't have it any other way.
Thank you. So let's start the pain and listen to a clip from Possessor.
Consider the face of Colin Tate. Father deceased, mother estranged, no siblings. Deals cocaine for a few years, then falls in love and becomes engaged to one of his rich clients, Ava Parse. She's the daughter of John Parse, CEO, Zuthru. Zuthru? Data mining. Largest operation outside the U.S. Head office is local. But our deal is with Reed Parse, John's stepson. And what's the narrative? Well, imagine Colin Tate as the unstable lover who feels diminished by his new family. Ava has all the power in the relationship. It's emasculating. He starts using more, behavior becoming more and more erratic. Ultimately, he breaks, killing John, kills Ava, kills himself. With Ava out of the picture, Reed inherits everything.
Sounds pretty succinct. Matt,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you tell people what is Possessor all about? And it's marketed as, Possessor Uncut in the United States, though from what I understand, there's no difference from the international releases. And it's sold as some soul-peeling experience. So, is it?
Yeah, so the fact that Chris gave this one to me to describe should tell you that it's difficult to describe, because he loves to do that because he's a jerk. But essentially, this is some kind of near future where a woman named, I believe, Thalia Voss, I think that's her first name. She's like this high-level corporate assassin, which essentially she does by pulling an Inception, where she hooks herself up to a machine and takes over the brain and body of somebody else. And that person's still in there somewhere, but she's essentially hitching a ride on this person's body to effect assassinations. And she goes on one last job.
Yes. So, Matt, was it the just horrific experience that it's been billed as? I mean, it's Possessor Uncut.
I knew very little about this film, but the fact that this was directed by a Cronenberg certainly put me in mind of what to expect. And I don't think I was disappointed. I think the apple didn't fall far from the body horror tree on this particular case. I would say it's definitely a strange film in the sense that it's at equal turns very kind of passionate and kind of wallowing in despair, but at the same time, it can be very detached, especially in its depictions of violence. It can almost seem cold and clinical, and it's this weird, jarring, unflinching look at some of the violence that I think a lot of people will have a tough time with. And then couple that with the kind of existential despair that all of the characters are going through constantly. It makes for a lovely, heady cocktail of good time feelings to watch with your grandma.
Oh, I agree. I mean, this thing, Matt, really just, to this day, it still sticks with me. I'm still not sure what I think about it, right? I just know I didn't like how I felt walking out of the theater. I can tell you that much. I was not pleased. And I don't know if it's something you can really enjoy. It's an exceptionally nihilistic film. I think it's the first pro-family annihilator movie that I've ever seen.
Right.
So I agree with you, too, that it does have Cronenberg's dad. His kind of DNA is all over this thing. I feel like he watched his dad's Ovra drop some acid and then decided to make a film. I mean, you could see the fingerprints all over there. And it opens like a sledgehammer. It really does. It's like the horror equivalent of a James Bond film. Right before the gun barrel sequence starts. You have that opening to kind of set the stage for everything. You have that assassination. And it is... Listen, as things are revealed as the film progresses, this movie gets darker and more disturbing. So as things roll around, right, she's possessed this guy, as you heard in the little clip we have there. So she can take out these people at this business, so then this guy can kind of take over control. And in fact, this corporation of assassins will also have an interest in they get some stock options in the company as well. So they have a real investment. This is the big payoff, Matt. This is the big money for all the jobs that they've done. And what ends up happening, or at least for me, is that it's that whole plot of the film is almost ancillary to what's really happening in this movie. And part of its success, I wonder, is what it opens up in my mind. Now, I'm wondering if I'm imagining what I watched, not that I didn't see what presented, but my interpretation of what this film is really about, how off I am. Basically, how it ends, I feel, is almost the main plot of this film. That when she is possessing this guy to annihilate his girlfriend, her father, and of course Sean Bean, who is the guy most killed guy in all films, I think, right? But either way, there's this fight where he's able to kind of push back against her, controlling his mind and his body. And as I'm watching this, I don't know how much of that is true. Or is she manipulating him the whole time, even when it appears she's not? Or is she's gone under so many times that her subconscious desire and needs are the things that are influencing him now, and not her conscious mind? What do you think about that?
It's a lot to unpack. I think that's a valid interpretation of this film, especially if you take some of the clues, with the little bit of her that we get outside of her profession, when she's kind of interacting with her quote unquote day-to-day life, trying to be a normie, if you will, and how that kind of plays out. I think that influences directly a lot of what you're saying.
I think the key too is when she comes out, right? They have this test. I remember Blade Runner 2049, where they measure everything. She has this test she has to pass. It's the framed butterfly. And when she answers the question about, she states she feels guilty about it still, and she doesn't.
Yeah,
that's why that snaps into place for me.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that when she answers that question initially, she throws in that coloration unprompted, right? I mean, the interviewer, Jennifer Jason Leigh, doesn't ask that question. She just kind of offers that extra bit of material.
True.
Whereas at the end, there is no embellishment. She doesn't offer anything further. So that also is interesting to kind of leave it vague. It almost is like, is she trying to see if she still feels those things herself? And maybe she does, or maybe she doesn't. That's part of the ambiguity of this thing. I don't know. I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think we could probably spend the next 45 minutes nerd rambling about this thing, whereas I don't think that that's necessarily fair to the film. I think this is one of those things that, honestly, I'm with you. I didn't know how I felt about this watching this, but this is the type of film, a la something like Climax, that I think is going to build on. I'm going to enjoy it, or at least be thinking about it a lot more and have a deeper appreciation for it the longer this thing goes on. I mean, it's a tough watch, and a lot of its themes and the violence and the kind of horrific feelings and actions that, we think as kind of empathetic human beings. And, it's uncut. So there is an erect penis in this. So that's probably, that is the thing that was probably meant to be cut out for the theatrical release or the US release. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and I really would be interested to hear what people have to say. I think it does a disservice for us to kind of really get into it as much as I would like to. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is definitely something worth watching. I would give it an A- personally.
Yeah. I think that with all the visuals that are presented to us, and the film is visually arresting. I mean, there's lots of jump cuts. There's lots of images flash in front of your eyes through different moments. And they're also just these use of color and the use of darkness. And it is an experience, like we said. Either way, when you walk out of this thing, I think everything that I saw and listened to and experienced is an indicator of art. And that's where I end up falling down on this thing. I end up giving it a B+, because it's so dark. And the reason I give it a B+, Matt, is because I did not like, as I said, how I felt after I watched this thing. And that is maybe just an indicator of how successful it is. But it's pushing down my enjoyment of the film, if that's even a word I can use. And it's forcing me to give it a B+. Maybe after a revisit, if that even occurs, or with some more time separated from the experience, I would go a little higher. It's just that it shook me to, it's not, it just bothers me. It really does, which is, I think, the whole point. So B+ for me, A- for you. If you've had a chance to see Possessor, which is in limited release right now. Let us know your thoughts. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Thanksgiving's right around the corner. You want to watch something with the family?
Yeah, you need a palate cleanser. After hanging out with your family, put this on. Make sure the kids are watching so they know what the stakes are, and go from there.
That Clockwork Orange thing, make sure their eyeballs are open the whole time.
Exactly.
Don't let them look away. Possessor. Coming up on physical media this upcoming Tuesday, Matt. October 27th. Man, dear God. Day is flying by. Finally, Matt, one of my favorite Clint Eastwood westerns is getting released on Blu-ray, or at least is rolling back into print. I think it's an initial release. Either way, let's take a listen.
I don't remember lending my wagons to be shot up by these goddamn fools out here.
You're gonna look awfully silly with that knife sticking up your ass. You still here?
No. No, I was just going.
Of course, that is the shooting training sequence from High Plains Drifter, the Clint Eastwood Western where he is the, bandit, outlaw, who nobody knows, this mysterious figure that rolls into town, and this town thinks that he's their savior when it's really quite something else is happening. And
I've never seen it.
You haven't seen High Plains Drifter?
I haven't seen High Plains Drifter. There's that one and The Outlaw Josie Wales. Those are the only two Clint Eastwood movies I haven't seen.
Wow. Outlaw is one of his best films, too. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
You should definitely check them out both, but I would say High Plains Drifter is actually a Halloween movie. It's a horror film in the end, really is what it is. I think it's a Western horror. So you can check out High Plains Drifter. Also, Joe Kidd and Two Mules for Sister Sarah getting their Blu-ray releases. Man, I'm surprised you haven't seen this. Interesting. All right. Also coming up, there's some things. Spine Chiller from Scream Team releasing. It's late October. The Spine Chiller is an annual Halloween dance with sinister beginnings. Take a trip with us as we delve into 4 different stories following 4 individuals who have been invited to this dance. Who will survive? What is going on at the Spine Chiller? New to Blu-ray, kinda. Criterion is releasing their version of Parasite, the best picture from last year, with a brand new 4K digital master print approved by Bong Joon-ho, includes a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, and also includes a black and white version of the film with an introduction by Bong as well. And new interviews, new conversations. I bought this on Blu-ray, Matt, when it first came out. And Criterion is having a flash sale. Actually, it's probably going to be over by the time we're done recording. But there will be another one coming on Barnes & Noble, I believe, in November.
Okay.
And unfortunately, this doesn't come out till next week, so you couldn't even get it as part of the Criterion sale right now because it's only in-stock stuff. But I think I'll be double-dipping on this one. I want to get that Criterion set with the black and white version.
Yeah.
And I will, if you want, I'm happy to mail you my copy of the other one.
Buddy.
So
sure. Thanks, buddy.
All right, I'll be happy to do that. Includes a bunch of other features. Blue Underground is giving us Daughters of Darkness in 4K, which I believe is currently streaming on Prime, maybe Shudder. It's a brand new 4K 16-bit restoration from the 35mm camera negative. Dolby Vision HDR presentation of the film with Dolby Atmos track as well. A new audio commentary and some new posters, still galleries, and then it has the alternate US main titles included for the first time as well. This is the one with Elizabeth Bathory, plays an ageless countess with a beautiful young companion, in air quotes, and a legacy of legendary perversion. But when the two women seduce a troubled newlywed couple, they unleash a frenzy of sudden violence and depraved desire that shock both the art house audiences and grindhouse crowds worldwide. So you can get this in 4K. A bunch of stuff including a soundtrack as part of this limited edition version. So make sure you get that first pressing if you want the soundtrack and the special lenticular slipcover. Also being released, I love Vinegar Syndrome. They do great stuff, but they release everything on the same day, and it's maddening to me. So we're going to run through a whole bunch of VS stuff right now. They have an exclusive release, only 4,000 copies of Deadly Games, also known as Dial Code Santa Claus. Thomas, a very intelligent and resourceful child, is left alone with his beloved and fragile granddad on Christmas Eve when a psychopath dressed as Santa Claus breaks into their mansion and starts chasing them. Thomas will do whatever he can to save himself and his pop-pop. Brand new 4K restoration of that from the 35mm negative. Interviews with director and actor, multiple gallery, storyboards, music videos, behind-the-scenes featurettes, and more. Vinegar's also releasing Rest in Pieces, another brand new 4K restoration. A newlywed couple move into a mansion of the bride's recently deceased aunt. Soon, strange things begin to happen, Matt, when the various tenants and servants of the mansion don't want to leave, and the bride and groom are in a deadly predicament. Includes both the original English and dubbed Spanish language soundtracks, audio commentary, interviews, and more. They're also releasing Zombie Apocalypse, also known as Cemetery of Terror. Brand new 4K restoration of this bad boy. It's Halloween night, and a group of bored teenagers decide to pull a ghastly prank as a means of getting lucky. Weird. Stealing a corpse from the local morgue and taking it to a nearby cemetery where they perform a satanic ritual in an attempt to bring it back to life. Unfortunately, they happen to choose the body of a savage serial killer who has just been shot dead by the popo. Ending a it just says police. Ending a recent spate of satanically influenced murders. Unwittingly reviving the bloodthirsty sadist to the realm of the undead, the group of fun-seeking youngsters risk becoming dinner for the devil-worshipping zombie. Commentary tracks included and a couple new interviews. They're giving us Necromancer, another limited 4,000 release. Another 4K restoration. Julie Johnson, a young college co-ed, is savagely assaulted. We talked about this previously, and I don't like using the term, but she's gang raped by a trio of men who then attempt to blackmail her into staying silent. As Julie attempts to put her life back together and deal with her new suspicious boyfriend, she learns of a strange fortune teller who professes to have the ability to exact revenge through supernatural means. Includes a video conference call with the director Dusty Nelson, an interview with actor Lee Cole, an interview with actor Wade Riddle, and more. They're also releasing for a 4,000 limited edition Matt Whodunit, another 4K restoration. While filming on a remote island, a low-budget cast and crew fall prey to a mysterious killer hell-bent on making a real-life snuff film. Includes a bunch of interviews with the cast and crew and a commentary track with the group Hysteria Continues. We're still not done. Killer Birds Zombie 5, also from Vinegar Syndrome. A group of students goes into the woods to study birds, and soon the dead begin to rise to devour the living. New 2K restoration of this. Includes both English and Italian dub tracks, and extended interviews and audio commentaries. Still not done. Grave Robbers. Teenagers accidentally resurrect a satanic killer who targets the local police captain's daughter to birth the Antichrist. 4K restoration there. Unearthing the Past. Interview with the director Ruben Gallendo Jr. A commentary track as well. We're close. Spellcaster. A group of people are killed one by one while participating in a $1 million treasure hunt in a mysterious Italian castle. And that, folks, is why you don't go to Italy. A new 2K restoration, 3 new interviews, promotional still gallery, and more. And again, limited to 4,000 copies. Almost there. Memorial Day Massacre. Campers on Memorial Day vacation or newly opened campground are terrorized by an axe-wielding feral man, which is what will happen. Brand new 4K restoration, interview with a director and actor. And your final Vinegar Syndrome releases, Matt. They released an Amityville box set. None of the, not the first one, but the kind of cheesy direct-to-DVD sequels that came out in the 90s. Well, all 4 are getting released now. They're broken out of the box set. You have The Evil Escapes, It's About Time, A New Generation, and Dollhouse. Synapse is releasing Shock Treatment, a brand new 2K restoration of the fully uncut version of the film with both English and French audio tracks. Doctors at a rejuvenation clinic discover a formula that prevents aging. However, it involves harvesting the blood and body parts of young men, a process that doctors aren't particularly averse to. Includes interviews with the people, the soundtrack composer, director, curator of Cinématique Française. We're going to go with Cinématique Française. Is that good? Is that close?
Sure.
Works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Synapse is also releasing The Black Cat, a 2K restoration of that one. A horror movie in production resurrects a witch called Lavanna. Lavanna tries to take over a world so that evil can be spread everywhere. But the only one in her way is Anne. Now the battle of good and evil begins. Synapse's final release is Patrick Still Lives. A bedridden psycho is able to receive evil vibrations from hardened criminals and uses them for his telekinetic powers. Brand new 2K restoration of the fully uncut version. Interview with actor Gianna Day. And a trailer and reversible wrap and slip cover. Arrow is giving us Cold Light of Day, a brand new 2K restoration from the original 16mm camera negative. This is the film about the story of the serial killer Dennis Nilsen. And there's a brand new audio commentaries, 2 of them in fact, newly filmed interviews, 2 short films as well, and more. How familiar you are with SOV films, Matt? Shot on video horror films.
Next to not at all.
Same with me. So Scary Tales, supposedly one of the granddaddies, one of the big films, horror films shot on video, is being released by American Genre Film Archive. A faceless storyteller relates 3 tales of Tor, or terror, some people say. I like to call it Tor. It sounds more intimidating. New remaster of the film from the original SVHS tape. Audio commentary track with the director Doug Ulrich. Outtakes and vintage TV promo appearances. Early short horror films by Ulrich. And more. Includes bonus movie Darkest Soul, the 1994 follow-up to Scary Tales. Warner Archive is giving us Waterloo Bridge and the Opposite Sex. And then finally, your straight-to-DVD pick of the week, Matt, is Attack of the Unknown. A SWAT team transporting a vicious crime syndicate boss find themselves trapped inside a county detention center during a catastrophic alien invasion. What should we be streaming this week?
Now available is one of the best films so far of the year, which is strange to say just because there's been so few movies that have come out this year. But Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, a film about a young woman from Pennsylvania traveling with her cousin to New York City to get a clandestine abortion, is now available for streaming on HBO Max. It is another, we're just hitting you with all the kinds of feel-good films today. It's a powerful film that should be watched, but I just wouldn't expect you to be full of the happies after that's over.
Absolutely not. Did you see it too? I think I tweeted out and I hit our social media with the HBO Max promo picture, which is like a stylized version of her singing the karaoke scene. And I'm like, what does HBO Max think this movie's about?
They're trying to sucker you in, make you think it's like a Pitch Perfect movie or something.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, you people are going to be in for a surprise looking for that. But that's probably one of my favorite. Is it my favorite film of the year? I don't know, man. We got to start thinking about that soon.
That'll be an interesting conversation.
Yes, it will be. So let's try and have a little fun, Matt. Let's talk about the horror comedy anthology film Scare Me.
So you're a writer, or?
Yeah, a novelist. Horror, mainly.
Huh. Horror. So do I.
So do I. So do you. So do you too. So do you novel too? Anything I've read?
I mean, I've got a few things in, had a few things in development.
Oh, so yours is a no.
What about you? Have you written anything that I've read, or?
I just wrote a book called Venus. It's about a little boy and his mom who.
The zombie outbreak book. You wrote Venus. I heard you on Fresh Air.
Oh, yeah.
You're a best-selling author. Wow.
Oh, I'm so sorry. This road is actually only for best-selling authors, so they might kick you out.
So Josh Rubin, Matt, who wrote, directed, and stars in this film along with Aya Cash, he is going through some difficult personal things, right? So he rents a cabin out in the woods in the middle of nowhere to try and kind of recenter himself and start working maybe on a book or something. I don't know. Just trying to figure out what's going on with his life. He comes across Aya Cash's character, Fanny, who wrote this massively huge, successful horror novel. And the two of them kind of have, as you heard, that's their introductory moment there. But then the power goes out in the cabin. So she comes over to see, hey, is your power out too? The two of them are stuck. So they start talking to each other and they start sharing scary stories because they're trying to scare each other, right? Because that's all they can really do. They got the fire going. And then things take a turn. So, Matt, we're supposed to be doing horror anthologies. And this is not an anthology film. I don't think really at all. I feel cheated. The longer it played, the angrier it got. I'm wondering, can I file for a show divorce? I'm not sure, because I was all looking forward to this, and you wanted to see Scare Me. You're like, I really want to watch this one. Something, all right, you know what? We'll do it. And listen, most of the time, it's very good. It's clever. It's fun. I think Aya Cash is great. I've been a big fan of hers for a while now. I haven't seen that show that she's on. It was on FX. Yeah,
You're the Worst. She's also in the latest season of The Boys.
Yeah, I haven't. I have 2 episodes to go of the first season with that one. I have 2 episodes to go left on Hannibal though, and I was gonna go from there to Chernobyl. And
Okay.
then maybe from there I'll finish The Boys. Either way, time is so precious now. I have to really plan all this stuff out. Either way, I like her a lot. I think she's very funny, and I thought her performances was quite good. And I enjoyed this for the most part. So I was, I think, able to overcome my seething anger of not being able to watch my anthology film this week. What about you? How did this thing work for you?
Yeah, it worked well for me. I enjoyed this. So I knew I knew going in that this was a change of the genre or the anthology archetype because this was such a low budget film. So basically the way to think about this is you take the, what's the word we're looking for? The arching story, the through line story that are in usually the framing story. Thank you. That are in most of these things, which would be two horror writers telling each other stories in a cabin. Well, instead of it cutting to an actual version of those stories, it just keeps showing them telling the stories, which
With some acting out of it a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And maybe an effect here or there, which I appreciated. I thought it was an interesting take on the thing. Given the fact of the budget constraints that this thing obviously had, I thought it was particularly effective. Yeah, I enjoyed this quite a bit. I know Chris really wanted to watch anthology films, and I knowingly sabotaged him with that he would not necessarily think this was an anthology film. I would disagree.
The loosest definition possible, if you get it. And in fact,
which is fine. You have to be challenged sometimes. We're gonna watch.
I got
some
challenged.
Anthology film.
I got challenged earlier in this show enough. All right,
but that was your choice.
That's true.
That's a choice you insisted upon. We're gonna watch something that's been out for 40, 50 years in the next week or two. So I mean, I figured go with something a very big curveball. But it sounds like, other than the fact that you were upset that it wasn't an anthology the way you hoped it would be, it sounds like you ultimately, though, had a decent enough time watching it.
Yeah, no, I did. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I think it may have actually been better if this was a single story inside of another anthology film. Then I think it would have worked even better. I wish it may have done more with its concept. I know I appreciate that we can't get those full reenactments that you're talking about, but it also wasn't as, I don't know, it wasn't as scary as I hoped it might be as well, even when the turn comes.
Sure.
I think the jokes, though, mostly work, and that's usually the downfall, right? When you try and make a horror comedy film, that the laughs just aren't there, and then the scares suffer because of it. I think, unfortunately for this, maybe the laughs are there, but the scares aren't really there at all. I hesitate to even really call it a horror film. This is a horror film, though this is not, I think, even close to the quality of it. Like Shaun of the Dead is a horror film. It's like Shaun of the Dead is not really scary at all. It's just a big. It's basically going to the Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, kind of a fun roller coaster, what Shaun of the Dead is. And it's a comedy, basically. It's clever, though. I like the conceit of it. It just may have worn a little thin at times for me, a little longer than I think it needed to be. Perhaps just give me a few more scares, a little more menace. I enjoyed Chris Redd's pop-up cameo in it, and I like the little addendum closer there with Bettina.
Yeah.
But it's fine. I enjoyed it for the most part. I ended up giving it a B, man.
Yeah, I gave it a B as well. I think, if you have Shudder, if you're one of the dozens of people who have Shudder, check it out. I mean, I think you'd have a good time watching it.
I think Shudder's doing relatively well.
Are they?
I understand
Good.
it is a profitable exercise for AMC. So I wouldn't be concerned. The only problem is you get cheated out. You get cheaped out on budgets sometimes, like the what you call it there, the relaunch of the show we did for the.
Oh yeah. That's Creepshow.
Creepshow, yeah.
Yes.
That felt very, very cheap sometimes.
Or you know what? And you made me watch Veronica, so you know what? I'm not sorry for making you watch this.
At least this was an enjoyable experience.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I want to do one of we got to do an Amicus film, at least one. And I want to do that new one that just premiered on Shudder this week, which is supposed to be really good.
Oh, okay.
Everything I've read. So,
okay.
And then I guess maybe we're out of time by then. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just watch a bunch for next week.
We can do two. We can do two more.
Yeah.
We could do, I think, the new one for super exciting next week's show, because we'll actually have a decent new film to watch.
That's true.
Potentially.
So, yeah, and we also, we'll talk about that later. All right. Scare Me. As Matt said, currently available on Shudder. What are your thoughts? Shoot us an email at feedback at thefirstrun.com. Now it's time to share our 5 favorite possession films. And you're going to listen now to Arnold Schwarzenegger put his breakfast together.
You are looking very sharp this morning.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You have about 5 minutes to get ready. Here. There's enough caffeine in this to kill an elephant. How to get you started.
So what's the day?
Transport.
Anyone special?
Now just some Wall Street scumbag.
Why the hell does he need all this protection?
Well, I guess he with some people that didn't like being with.
Personally, I like scumbags. They pay better. Say breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
All right, so just in order, here's what goes in Arnold's Shake. Now, if you were to describe that, just the stereotypical funny, bad shake gag.
Yeah.
Right? How many of these would you tick off? Number 1, coffee. Number 2, Pepto-Bismol.
Okay.
3, at least a day-old beer.
Okay.
4, what I think is a hot dog. The scene's very dark, so I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
A bucket or a packet of Chinese food.
Okay.
And then finally, from the floor, a slice of pizza.
Okay, very good. See, I would have guessed that he would have thrown some raw eggs in there just for
right.
hangover cure, and then maybe a dash of hot sauce. But if those 2 items were in there, I think they would be perfect.
All right. Well, that's it. That's the shake that Arnold assembles from End of Days. His dreary, bad, boring horror action film. You heard that Kevin Pollak in that movie as well. Robin Tunney is in that. Gabriel Byrne, of course, is possessed in that film by the devil. And I was running that movie theater, Matt, when that movie came out.
Oh, really?
And I think was it kind of the beginning of the end for Arnold? Was it when was Collateral out? I don't know, but after things just started. Their Sixth Day, which actually I just bought on iTunes because it was $5, and I only had it on DVD. Because we all know, any long-time listeners of the show know of my affection for Mr. Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, I would say that it really kicked off, like where his decline really started was Eraser. I think that was like I think that was people. Yeah, they were really trying to push that this was a good action movie, and it was not.
They had this cool spent uranium shell gun type things.
Right,
the rail gun. It was called a rail gun. I remember now.
Yeah.
That was not good either. All right. Anyway, there was a possession in that movie, so I got to sneak in an Arnold clip, and now you know what to make for yourself for breakfast tomorrow.
There you go.
All right, man. I guess I'll go first. My list is odd. Like I keep going back and forth on this one, and of course I'm going to make this my honorary The Exorcist list because I think that's kind of the layup.
Yeah.
So I tried to pick some stuff that was really disturbing or had an impact on me. So this is not going to be your traditional 5 through 1 quality of film list. These are just 5 films that really kind of hit me when I watched them.
Okay.
That involved possession. So number 5 for me took this series and put it on its head. So the first film, which may be, next to Paranormal Activity, maybe one of the best found footage films ever made. The second film, I think maybe even better. I haven't seen the third and the fourth ones, though I recently bought the box set to watch it because I only had the first 2 on DVD. But Scream Factory put out a Blu-ray set of all 4. So the first film, you have something weird and bad going on in this apartment building, and it looks like there's this zombie kind of almost 28 days later virus thing spreading through the building, and the cops show up to find out what's happening. And of course, I'm talking about the Rec series from France. Rec 2, we build on everything. I think it's even scarier, much more effective, but it goes from some weird zombie virus to a possession film. And the thing is revealed to be someone working who's possessing people and then infecting them, which then creates our zombies. Anyway, the way that thing is done and how we were able to improve upon stuff from Rec which of course you're basically watching everything through the camera lens of the news reporter and I should say their camera person. The second one, I believe, we're just following the cops around. But still, it is very effective. So my number 5 is Rec 2. If you haven't seen Rec 1 and 2, I highly recommend them. As I said, I haven't seen 3 and 4. If I'm understanding 3 is okay, and 4 is just ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, Rec 2, number 5.
Yeah, it's funny that you kind of gave that preamble. I also am keeping The Exorcist off this list just because I feel like that would be the automatic number 1. Yeah. If you haven't seen The Exorcist, you do yourself a favor and watch it. And also, I would say this is not in any list particular order of quality. It's just kind of like 5 films that I threw up there. So my number 5 is a film that Chris and I have mentioned a lot of late, at least a few times this year that I can recall. And it's the Megan Fox vehicle, Jennifer's Body, written by Diablo Cody. It's a criminally, I think, underrated little horror comedy film that is actually, I don't hate both of those things put together in this particular case, but essentially it stars Megan Fox as a kind of quintessential hot girl in high school who is offered up as a sacrifice by a indie rock band who wants to become famous, but instead of being killed, she is possessed by a demon and she exacts her bloody revenge on the populace of her small town. Also stars Amanda Seyfried as her best friend. It's got a lot of different undercurrents about female friendship when they're, in the teenage years and kind of how that kind of interacts with each other and growing apart and things like that. It's an interesting little film, and I think overall it's really well done. I wish it was more appreciated than it is.
Yeah, I don't know if it was ahead of its time or just people just misinterpreted what the film was about, or it has seemed to have gotten a little bit of a second life, at least on film Twitter. It gets brought up a lot more the last 6 months to a year than it has been previously. So we are pretty happy to see that. I did list it as an honorable mention for me. That is a good one. My number 4 then is Daniel Stam's The Last Exorcism with Patrick Fabian and Ashley Bell. Fabian plays a kind of, what are these, preachers, right? These snake oil kind of preacher guys. And he fakes all these exorcisms and he just goes around and kind of just makes some money, and then, and he gets called in to do another one. And really, he looks at it as, listen, maybe I'm lying to these people, but I'm helping them feel better because they have deep kind of psychological issues. But what happens is when he encounters Ashley Bell's character, there is something else going on here. Nell is her name. And there's even something more going on than maybe even just this possession. So it is exceptionally effective, a low-budget film, big success, and it was just really creepy and well done, and it kind of, again, has that documentary feel to it, which is, I think, what really helps bring this authenticity to the film. And Belle is quite good as Nell, as the possessed young woman. So I'm a big fan of Last Exorcism. I think I've watched it 3 or 4 times over the last 6, 7 years. I just think it's really well done. So that's my number 4.
So yeah, I had The Last Exorcism on higher up in the placement of the list, but I'll go ahead and bring it down now and talk about it since it's not that big a deal of where it's located. I wholeheartedly agree with Chris. I was pleasantly surprised by this film. I mean, as we know, found footage horror films are really hit or miss, more often in the miss category, and I thought this was extremely effective. I appreciated the way they approached it. And just kind of for a straight up exorcism possession film, I think it's very, very effective, and it gets progressively creepier, and that ending is also particularly effective. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, all right, so I wanted to spend a couple minutes then. Oh, I should say too, the sequel is horrible. If you've seen part 2,
I haven't seen it. I have not.
It's really bad. It's not remotely scary. It's very droll and dull, and it's not good. Don't waste your time. Just stick with the original. So my number 3 then, I wanted to get some Italian horror in here. So I went Lamberto Bava's Demons film, Demons 1 and 2. The first one take place in a movie theater where everybody kind of gets possessed by, they're showing a horror film, and people get possessed by, if you get scratched by one of them, basically you become then a host for this demon. And these people are basically trapped in this movie theater trying to escape. The second one takes place basically right afterwards in this apartment building. Somehow, if you're watching it, they're able to come through the whatever. But it's just great Italian horror, lots of use of color and lights, lots of gore, all that great stuff. So it's also like the quintessential Italian horror film. Both of these films, they're very highly enjoyable, just kind of gonzo Italian horror stuff. So if you're a fan, I can't recommend Lamberto Bava's Demons films enough. You'll want to check them out. produced by Argento.
All right, so my number 3 is one of 2 movies that we had no business being as entertaining as they were. So my number 3 that I'm going to go with first is Annabelle Creation, the 4th film in the Conjuring franchise, sequel to the original Annabelle film, which is not good. But this film is actually surprisingly effective. It's really about as the name would suggest, the creation of the Annabelle doll, kind of a made-up backstory where a young girl dies, basically becomes an entity and opens a doorway to something evil into an orphanage that becomes of her old house, and then it kind of progresses and takes over some of the girls. The scares in it, while they are pretty PG, or at least they're not gory, are actually quite effective. It does have some serious dread in it, and overall, it's a suspenseful, cool little haunted house / possession film. I think it was, like I said, a lot better than it had any right to be.
I wonder if there'll be another Flanagan film coming up on your list, and if you're...
I wonder.
Interesting. All right. So my number 2 is a film I watched. I bought it on DVD back when I was big into foreign horror in the late 90s, early aughts, I think. And it's stuck with me, and it's never gotten out of my head. I don't think I've ever talked about it on the show, though. And when we were putting this list together, I thought, oh, you know what? This is my chance. So I'm going with Andrei Zulawski's Possession, starring Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani. This is a film that will just kind of stick to your guts, your ribs, and you won't get rid of it. It'll haunt you. Basically, Neill and Adjani, their relationship, Matt, is kind of falling apart, right? And he's convinced she's cheating on him with another man. And she's up to something. And that's all I'm going to say. So if you haven't seen Possession, it's a French film. It's very unsettling. It's one of the best unsettling kind of horror films that I think you'll see. There's one really memorable scene any real horror aficionado knows involved. I'm not going to mention it because to say anything about it spoils the film. Check it out if you can. I'm not even sure if Possession is streaming anywhere. I'm going to look that up. I don't think it is. In fact, I remember a while back, like a month ago or so, Netflix announced they were going to be adding Possession. And everybody in the horror community got all excited because you can't really watch it anywhere. I think it may even be on print in the States. And it turned out it was another movie called Possession. It wasn't this one.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, but that's my number 2.
All right, so my number 2, as Chris alluded to, is a film, again, that was a sequel to a middling to not good original. This is Mike Flanagan's Ouija Origin of Evil. It's your typical creepy kid story where a young girl who participates in her mother's business of like fake seances and psychic grift that they perform on the town begins playing with a Ouija board and actually invites a true demonic entity into the house that essentially tries to take over her body. It is a PG, and I say that in the sense that it's not gory, but it's very effective in its kind of creepiness and its suspense. And the ghost effects were surprisingly effective. I got some real chills watching this film. So again, another film that is better than any right that it had to be, that you thought it would be from the source material that it's based off of.
Yeah, no, that's a good pick. So my number 1, oh, by the way, Possession is not available to stream or buy, it looks like, anywhere in the States. So sorry, folks, I'm not sure how you're going to find it. Maybe you can find a used copy somewhere. Or I'm sure there are alternative methods out there online. You might be able to track it down, maybe. So my number 1, I went back and forth, Matt, on this. Initially, I was actually going to go with Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead remake. Because that is an intense experience as well. But I actually decided in the end to go to, I guess I am. Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria remake from 2018. This thing takes everything that's great about Argento's film technically. Its use of color, right, and music and how big and bombastic it all is, and does the exact opposite. He drains all the color out of it. Right, and everything is it's in a weird way, by going in an entire opposite direction from Argento's film, he still makes a film that's perhaps even creepier and more disturbing than the original. And while the original film isn't really about possession, right, it's more about just witches and this coven or coven, depending on how you want to pronounce it. There is a scene where that young dancer gets possessed, right, and she's danced basically to death, is I guess how you'd put it. And that's how it gets on my list, basically. It's a terrifying movie. And Tilda Swinton plays 3 different roles, which I remember when we watched it, I didn't even realize. I thought she just played 2. And but a fantastic cast, even including Dakota Johnson, I'm going to say it. But Mia Goth, and it's just a really great, unsettling horror film. I really enjoyed the hell out of this thing, which is available currently on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Suspiria is an interesting case. It was in my honorable mentions. It's a film that, you would think that when this was announced, it was like, oh, this is such a terrible idea to remake such a classic film. And they managed to make it its own thing and make it quite effective. I was surprised at how much I appreciated that film. So my number 1 is probably a bit of a layup, not as much of a layup as The Exorcist is, but it's going to be Hereditary. A fun film that's feel good romp through family discourse and strife. But essentially, it's the story of a family who's kind of witness to tragedy, and it kind of falls apart, and that opens up an entity that's been stalking their family for generations. It is a brutal film. It is a tough sit, but it is extremely effective. Toni Collette is by far fantastic in this. So if you haven't seen it, check it out, but be prepared that you may need a palate cleanser afterwards.
Oof, yeah, that was on my list a little bit too as well, but I felt that has a little more notoriety. It's a little more, people know about Hereditary, and they may not be as on the ball about some of the stuff that I brought up, so I feel like that's why it didn't really make my list, but that is a great pick as well. Honorable mentions for me, Matt, stuff we didn't mention, Paranormal Activity, the first 2 I really like, maybe even the third. Which one they put the camera on the oscillating fan? I remember how
that's the third one.
Yeah, I was like, that's brilliant. It's so simple, but it's so effective. So, what else? Night of the Demons, the classic 80s horror film. Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, just in all of its cheesiness, but it's still very effective. You mentioned Ouija, Origin of Evil. Insidious, that first film is really good. Conjuring, and then, that's it. You mentioned, or I mentioned everything else I had.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I had on my list that hasn't been mentioned is I would throw a shout out to Evil Dead 2. Yeah. Obviously, it's a classic of horror comedy, but the whole Evil Dead franchise is based on possession, so you can really watch any of them. That's
true, and I do have a note in the very beginning that I was going for scares, so I laid off the OG Evil Dead movies. Mm-hmm. Though the first one scared the hell out of me as a kid. That one actually really worked on me. Yeah. But, I don't know. I'm a little more sophisticated. I need a little more...
a little more jaded with the world at this point.
Basically. So what's your favorite possession film? Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Next week, I don't know. We got the Trial of the Chicago 7's on Netflix. There's...
isn't Borat going to come out on the 23rd?
Is it the 23rd? I thought it was the following week. Is it the 23rd?
I believe it's the 23rd.
All right, maybe we're doing this Borat sequel. I started rewatching that the other day too, which it still works for me. It's still pretty funny.
All right.
So maybe we're doing Borat. We're going to do another anthology film. We have 2 more to squeeze in. Maybe we'll do them both. Who knows? Lots going on. In the meantime, you can always find us at thefirstrun.com. Go over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Do a search for The First Run. Scroll. Eventually you will find us. Go over to Apple Podcasts. Give us a review. We'll read it on the air, and it'll help other people find the show. You want other people to find the show. You enjoy this, right? For the most part, mostly. You want other people to listen, don't you? We do. And that's it. So, Matt, let's go ahead then. We're going to take an extended break, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Groovy.